Alright, welcome back to the New Sentinel, folks. Today, we're diving into some of the most seismic shifts in American law we've seen in years. I'm Chukwuka, and joining me are Major Graves, Olga, and Duke. Let's get right into it. Birthright citizenship. Now, if you remember, we touched on the One Big Beautiful Bill fallout a couple episodes back. But this time, it's Trump's Executive Order 12160 that's got everyone talking. Basically, it tried to deny citizenship to kids born here if their parents aren't citizens. That's a direct shot at the 14th Amendment, yeah? But the courts, they weren't having it. They blocked it with these class-based injunctions, which, I gotta say, is a clever workaround since the Supreme Court's been narrowing those big, sweeping nationwide injunctions lately.
Yeah, and you know, Chukwuka, what's wild is how these class actions are now the main line of defense. Used to be, a single judge could freeze a federal policy for the whole country. Now, after Trump versus Casa, it's more like, if you're not in the class, you're out of luck. But for those kids, it's a lifeline. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands who'd be stateless otherwise. That's not just legal theory, that's real lives on the line.
And it's not just about paperwork, right? These are families who've built their lives here, children who know no other country. The court stepping in, even with these narrower tools, is the only thing standing between them and a future in limbo. But you know, it's also a sign. Rights are being reframed as collective harm, not just individual cases. That's a big shift in how we think about equal protection.
Yeah, but let's not forget, folks, this is about the rule of law. If the executive branch wants to push the envelope, the court's got to check them. But I'll say this, class actions or not, it's a patch job. Congress needs to step up and clarify the law, or we're just going to keep seeing these legal ping-pong matches. That's not good for anybody, especially not for the troops on the ground, so to speak.
Speaking of ping-pong, let's talk about the Supreme Court's decision on parents opting out of LGBTQ+ curriculum. Now, this one's got legs. The court said, look, if your religious beliefs are at odds with what's being taught, you can pull your kid out. That's a big expansion of religious accommodation in schools. And honestly, it's going to open the door for all sorts of opt-outs. Race, sex ed, climate science, you name it. I remember back in my military days, policy changes like this always hit the most vulnerable first. You think you're just tweaking a rule, but suddenly, whole groups are left out or left behind.
Exactly, Chukwuka. And it's not just about religious freedom, it's about whose freedom gets prioritized. When you let parents opt out, you risk undermining inclusive education. The precedent here is huge. It's not just LGBTQ+ content. Now any curriculum that clashes with someone's beliefs could be challenged. That's a slippery slope, and it's marginalized kids who pay the price.
Yeah, but you gotta respect the balance, Olga. The court's just expanding on the old Yoder case. Parents' rights versus state mandates. I don't always agree with the outcomes, but I get the logic. Still, it's going to make school boards' jobs a nightmare. Every lesson plan's a potential lawsuit now.
And then you got the Tennessee gender-affirming care case. The Supreme Court said, basically, transgender status doesn't get special legal protection, just rational basis review. That's a big deal. Makes it a lot harder for trans youth to win in court. I mean, I might not agree with all the activism, but I know what it's like when the law changes overnight and you're left scrambling. That's what's happening here. State courts and legislatures are the new battlegrounds.
Yeah, Duke, and that's the thing. These aren't just abstract rulings. They change lives, for better or worse. When I was in the service, you'd see how a new policy could upend everything for folks who didn't have a voice. That's what's at stake here. All right, let's keep moving. Because these court fights aren't just about rights. They're about who gets to call the shots in government, too.
So, let's break down the agency independence mess. This year, the administration tried to clean house, firing agency heads left and right. But the Supreme Court drew a line. The Federal Reserve stays independent, but the National Labor Relations Board, fair game for the executive. That's a pretty sharp distinction. It's like in the Army, you got units that answer straight to the top, and others that need to operate with some autonomy. The Fed's like your special ops. Can't have politicians calling the shots on monetary policy every time the wind changes. But labor boards, that's more like regular command, subject to the chain of command for better or worse.
Yeah, Major. And what is wild is, agency autonomy used to be a given. Now it's got to be earned, statutory, not just tradition. That's a big shift. If you're running an agency, you better have your legal paperwork in order, or you're out. I mean, it's like in the field. If your orders aren't clear, you're just waiting for someone to pull the rug out from under you.
And this isn't just bureaucratic drama. When you weaken agency independence, you risk politicizing everything from interest rates to labor rights. That's not just a technical issue, it affects real people. If the Federal Reserve lost its independence, imagine the chaos for families with mortgages, for workers whose jobs depend on stable policy. We're seeing the courts say some things are too important to be left to political whims.
And let's not forget, the Supreme Court's also been narrowing those big, sweeping injunctions. Used to be, you could freeze a federal policy nationwide with one ruling. Now, after Trump versus Casa, it's more like, if you're not in the class, you're not covered. That's changing how lawyers fight these battles. It's more targeted, but it also means some folks fall through the cracks. I might be wrong, but it feels like the courts are saying, we'll step in, but only so far.
Yeah, and that's strategic too. If you're challenging a federal policy now, you gotta build a class, not just find a sympathetic plaintiff. It's like planning a campaign. You need numbers, not just a good story. And for the agencies, it's a warning. Your independence isn't guaranteed. You gotta fight for it every time.
And that's going to affect every future constitutional challenge. The playbook's changed. You can't just run to the courts and expect a nationwide freeze. You got to be smarter, more tactical. That's the new normal, and it's going to keep lawyers busy for years.
But let's not lose sight of the people caught in the middle. When agencies get tossed around like political footballs, it's workers, families, and communities who pay the price. We need to remember that these legal battles aren't just about power, they're about lives. And as we've seen, the courts are recalibrating the balance, but the human cost is still very real.
Well said, Olga. All right, let's shift gears a bit, because the next battleground is where faith, federalism, and the courts all collide. And trust me, it's just as messy. So, let's talk about the Oklahoma Catholic charter school case. The state tried to fund a religious charter school with public money, and the Supreme Court deadlocked, 4-4. That means the state ban stands, but there's no national precedent. It's like the door's still open for other states to try the same thing. And you better believe they will. This is going to keep coming up, especially in more conservative states, looking to push the envelope on faith-based education.
Yeah, and with that deadlock, it's like a green light for more litigation. No clear answer, so every state's going to take a shot. I mean, we've seen this before. When the courts punt, the states get creative. And it's not just about schools, it's about who controls the purse strings and what counts as religious liberty. That's a fight that's just getting started.
And don't forget, the Supreme Court's ambiguity here is strategic too. By not setting a precedent, they're letting the lower courts and the states hash it out. It's like a standoff. Nobody wants to make the first move, but everyone's loading up for the next round. That's federalism in action, for better or worse.
And while the legal chess game plays out, real families are caught in the crossfire. I've been working on a report about families affected by these fast-track deportations. The courts have been upholding the administration's push for speedier removals, citing the plenary power doctrine. That means the executive branch gets almost total control over immigration enforcement, and due process rights for non-citizens are shrinking. I spoke to parents who were separated from their children with almost no warning, no time to say goodbye, no chance to make their case. It's devastating. The law might be clear, but the human cost is enormous.
That's the thing, Olga. The courts are deferring to the executive on immigration, but it's not just a policy debate. It's about families, about kids growing up without their parents. And as we've seen, when the law moves fast, people get left behind. We've talked about this before. Back in our episode on the One Big Beautiful Bill, how legal changes ripple out and hit the most vulnerable first. It's the same story here.
And it's not just immigration. These rulings are setting the stage for more fights over public funding, religious liberty, and who gets to decide what's taught in schools. The courts aren't giving clear answers, so the battles are moving to the states. That's federalism, but it's also chaos. And for the folks on the ground, it's a mess.
Yeah, Duke. And it's going to keep lawyers, activists, and politicians busy for a long time. The only thing that's certain is more uncertainty. But that's the American system. Messy, loud, and always changing.
And as always, it's the people with the least power who feel the impact first. We need to keep telling their stories, keep pushing for justice, even when the courts won't. That's what keeps me going anyway.
All right, that's all for today's episode of The New Sentinel. These legal battles are far from over, and you can bet we'll be tracking every twist and turn. Thanks for joining us. Major Graves, Olga, Duke, always a pleasure.
Good talk, y'all. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and keep fighting the good fight.
Roger that. Catch y'all next time. Out.